They say pain has a sound, but I think it has a silence too. And I live in that silence every day. It begins before the sun does, this hush that settles in the bones of the building, an old watchtower, long repurposed into something colder. My eyes open not because of light, but because of habit. There's no rooster crow here, no cheerful morning clatter, only the echo of dripping water through stone, and the heavy, waiting presence of iron. The room I sleep in is small. Cold in winter, damp in summer, the walls sweat. The straw mattress beneath me offers little comfort, matted, musty, and chewed through in places by mice who know I'll never chase them off. Let them come. Even the smallest creatures need shelter, I suppose. My shift is coarse wool, mended over and over until the original weave is barely left. It itches. I wake with creases on my skin where I've slept on rough seams. My feet hit the stone floor with a soft thud. It's always a little jarring, that first moment of cold. A sharp little reminder that, yes, the day has begun, and yes, I'm still here. The tools hang quietly on the opposite wall. I do not look at them yet, not so early. It's easier to pretend, just for a while, that today might be different, that perhaps I'll be spared from their use, but I know better. The air smells of wax and smoke, mingled faintly with something metallic, something that lingers even when everything has been cleaned. Some things cannot be scrubbed away. I've tried. The brick floor still holds the memory of blood like a scar holds a story. I light a single candle. It flickers, catching on the darkened edges of my reflection in the polished copper plate I use as a mirror. My hair, tied back with an old strip of linen. My eyes sunken from sleep that rarely rests me. My mouth, a little crooked, always unsure whether to frown or remain expressionless. I do not smile much anymore. Outside, the world is waking. The baker's boy, clumsy on his feet, runs past on some errand. I hear the soft lowing of a cow from somewhere down the lane. A cartwheel creaks. For a moment, the world sounds like any village alive, simple, going about its day. But I am not a part of that rhythm. I walk beside it, but not within it. They do not greet me in the street. Not unless they must. My father, he was the torturer before me. And his father before him, not by choice, I think. But once you are marked, the village does not forget. When he died suddenly, without warning, there was no discussion, no notice nailed to a post. Just a quiet visit from the magistrate, a firm hand on my shoulder. A single question, shaped like a command. You'll take up the post? And what else could I say? There were no other women in my village who wielded iron, but grief makes strange things of us. My hands, once trained for spinning wool and slicing bread, became hands that turned cranks and coiled ropes. And the first time I stood in the chamber, alone, I was not yet 20. My apron was too clean. My fingers too soft. I wept the first night, quietly, so no one would hear. There is no glory in this work, no medals, no feast days, only the reassurance that you are doing what must be done. That is what they always say, what must be done. As if pain were a kind of service, as if silence bought peace. But I have never found peace within these walls. Some days I do nothing but wait, no prisoner, no need. I sweep, I oil the hinges of the door. I polish the wood where it's worn smooth from hands and weight. It is strange to care for such a place, as if tending it might make it less cruel. And yet there's a strange comfort in the routine. The predictability, the same stone, the same shadows, the same narrow window high in the wall, through which sunlight falls like a blade. At market they glance at me. Some avoid my eyes. Others pretend not to know who I am. But always, there is that edge of fear, of curiosity, of something else they dare not name. I do not blame them. I'm not sure what I would think were our places reversed. Children are the most honest. They whisper when I pass, point, sometimes ask their mothers questions I cannot hear. And their mothers, flustered, hush them quickly and lead them away. I try not to listen, I try not to mind, and yet there are days I stand at the well and wonder what it would be like to draw water without those stairs. To sit at a table in the tavern without silence spreading around me like spilled ale. To be asked to dance at the harvest fair like I was before the black robe, before the title, before I became the reminder of what pain sounds like. Sometimes I dream of other lives. I dream of herb gardens and warm kitchens, of rough laughter and shared loaves, of nothing more than sore feet and aching shoulders. I wonder what I might have been had fate turned just a little to the left. But dreams are luxuries. And mine is a life shaped by iron, not by maybes. So I take the bucket, I fetch the bread. I return to the chamber, I polish the metal until it shines. I do my job, and still, I wait for the silence. Not the silence of the room that is always with me, but the silence within myself. The kind that comes when guilt no longer bites, when memory does not ache. That silence has not yet come. As you listen, I wonder, what would you have done in my place? I remember the first time I held the cord and winch. My hands didn't shake then, not yet. I was 12, maybe 13. Too young, really, for what I was being asked to do, though no one said as much. My father didn't believe in shielding. He said that hiding the truth only made it worse when it found you anyway. And the truth, for us, was a small wooden box filled with instruments kept beneath his bed. He opened it one morning without a word. The room was still dim. I'd only just rubbed the sleep from my eyes. He said, "You'll need to learn these." That was all. There was no ceremony, no moment of dread. Just one day child, the next apprentice to something older and heavier than I could understand. He laid them out on the table like you might lay out tools for mending a boot, calmly, as if they weren't things meant to change a person forever. A slender iron probe, a set of cords, a thin-bladed knife. Each one had a purpose, each one had a history. Some still carried stains, though he'd scrubbed them clean. "You must know their weight," he said, placing the iron cuff in my hand. "And you must never forget what they do." I nodded, though I didn't really understand. Not yet. At that age, you think understanding comes from hearing. But in truth, it comes later slowly, with repetition, with echoes that return to you in the quiet. He didn't hurt anyone in front of me. Not then, but he made me watch the rituals, the preparation, the method. There was no room for error, he said. No space for indulgence. Every turn of the crank, every question asked, had to serve a purpose. Control was everything. We were not permitted to be angry. We were not allowed to cry. He said emotion blurred the line between punishment and vengeance, and once that line blurred, you became the thing people already feared you were. I watched him grow old doing this, not quickly but steadily. His hands, once so firm, began to tremble. His knees cracked when he knelt to bind a wrist. He taught me how to read a body not with books we had none, but by looking, listening, a change in breath, the way someone swallowed, the way their shoulders rose when you stepped close. Pain, he told me, is a language. And if you don't listen, you won't hear the answer you're meant to get. I didn't know how to feel about that. I still don't. The first time I tried it, under his supervision, my hands were dry and clumsy. I was meant only to bind a man's ankles. He was accused of theft or maybe lying under oath. I don't recall. I remember only the way the rope bit into my palms and how my mouth went dry when the man looked at me. He didn't curse. He didn't beg, he just stared. And I, who had done nothing yet, already felt dirty. After, I scrubbed my hands with ash and water until my knuckles split. My father said nothing, he only nodded. And the next morning he handed me the crank. "You won't always have someone to guide you," he said. I don't know when I stopped questioning him. Maybe when the magistrate began to ask for me instead of him. Maybe when the townspeople began to look at me the way they used to look at him, half-needed, half-feared. No one offered us wine at weddings. No one invited us to share bread under their roof unless they were forced to. At festivals, we stood at the edges, watching others dance. There were whispers, always. "That's her." The one who does the hurting, sometimes they'd lower their voices. Sometimes they didn't bother. It didn't matter. Words cling harder than rope. But there were moments, quiet, strange moments, when someone would meet my eye and say, "I'm sorry you have to do this." Or I couldn't bear it myself. Once, a woman placed a bundle of herbs at my doorstep and left without knocking. For strength, the note said, no name. I never found out who she was. But I dried the herbs and I keep them still. The tools, they were never beautiful. Not even in a craftsman's sense. But I cared for them the way a smith might care for his hammer. They had to be precise. Rust was dangerous. Splinters could twist under the skin. A dull blade tore rather than cut. Cleaning them was meditative. Warm water, then cool. Oil rubbed in gently. I knew the squeak each hinge made, the way each screw turned in my fingers. The wheel, the rack, the press, I knew them like other women knew the shape of their garden beds. Sometimes I wonder what that says about me. I never gave the tools names. My father did, though he never told me most of them. I heard him once, speaking low, almost reverently, as he ran a cloth over the edge of a vise. "Old friend," he whispered. Was it comfort, was it madness, or maybe both? When you do this long enough, the line blurs. And still, in all the years I learned, there was no scroll, no charter, no oath. You simply knew. You learned by watching someone suffer. You learned by noticing what worked, what did not. When someone was lying, when they were not, and whether or not the truth even mattered anymore. Because sometimes I think it didn't, not to them, not to the ones giving orders. There was a rhythm to the way knowledge passed down, like a family recipe passed from memory without ink or parchment, and with it came a code. A strange, unwritten rule book that no one acknowledged, yet everyone followed. Don't ask why the prisoner was brought in. Don't look them in the eye unless you want to remember them. Don't flinch, not even once. And when the door closes, never speak of what you did beyond it. The magistrate would visit sometimes, check the records. He'd talk with the local priests, shake hands with merchants, and then come to see me, always in private. He'd hand me a list, and I'd read the names quietly, then he'd nod and leave. What choice did I have? What choice do most of us ever really have? You learn early that to live in a village is to fit your role. The smith makes the horseshoes. The baker rises before the sun. The washerwoman stands with red, cracked hands in the river. And I tend to the darker corners. They don't say thank you. They don't have to. It's not that kind of work. But once, years ago, a mother came to me. Her son had been accused wrongly, I believe now, though I'll never be sure. She didn't beg for his freedom. She only said, if you must hurt him, do it quickly. And I promised her I would. Would you like to hear more stories like this? Let me know in the comments. Or gently tap the subscribe button. Because sometimes the truth lies not in the loudest histories, but in the quiet ones. The ones whispered by those no one wanted to hear. Most people think it was all screaming and fire, but no. It was more often silence and breath. The chamber is not what you'd imagine. It is neither grand nor ghastly. Just a room, really. Square, low ceilings, stone walls, damp in the corners. The kind of damp that seeps into the bones, makes the iron tools rust if you don't keep them oiled, makes your joints ache in winter. There's a window, but it's too high for looking out of. Just enough to let in a sliver of daylight when the clouds permit it. It smells of earth and smoke. Old wood, oil, there's a faint hint of something acrid beneath it, all something you can't quite name, but you know it's there. Like ash that's settled too deep to be swept out. A single torch burns when I work. Sometimes two, if the magistrate insists. They flicker on the walls, casting long, slow-moving shadows that stretch across the floor like reaching hands. The light dances across hooks and pulleys, chains and racks until they almost look alive, but they are still. They wait. Everything in here waits. The table at the center is oak, darkened by time, worn smooth along the edges where hands have gripped it, some mine, some others. There are iron rings at the corners. I polish them, though I don't know why. No one notices but me. Still, it feels wrong to let them dull. The tools hang along one wall, each in its place. Thumb screws, gently tightened. The boot iron and hinged, lined with wedges. The rack is on wheels, which I keep greased. Even now, after all these years, I still wince if it squeaks. The sound carries, and it does something to people. Sharp noises open doors inside the mind that are better left closed. There is a rhythm to preparing this room. A ritual, not because I enjoy it, not because I believe in it, but because routine is a shield. A small one, but a shield all the same. I begin by lighting the torches, watching the flame take. I oil the hinges door, clamps, pulleys. I arrange the tools in the order I might need them. Cloths are folded nearby, clean linen torn into strips. A bucket sits by the wall. Another beside it for water. One is always cleaner than the other. Then I breathe. Just once, deeply. That breath marks the beginning. Some days, no one comes, and still I prepare. It's easier that way. Routine asks no questions. When a prisoner is brought in, I do not speak to them right away. I record their name if they have one. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they are only called the Miller S. boy or that one from the next village. I do not ask why they're here. I am not the judge. I am not the priest. I am the one who waits until others have made their decision. But sometimes I see the fear in their eyes before the door even closes. And sometimes that fear is the loudest thing in the room. It is strange, the power of quiet, of breath, of the way someone looks at a chair before sitting in it, the sound of a chain settling on stone, the rattle of metal in a tray. You learn to read those things, to sense them. When someone is about to speak or cry or faint, there is a calm to it, in a way. Not peace, never peace, but something near to it. A kind of detachment, the same kind a surgeon must feel, I imagine. Hands steady, breath slow, eyes sharp. That detachment took time to learn. In the early days, I couldn't keep it. I'd feel the fear soaking through the walls, clinging to me long after the door was locked again. I'd shake. Not visibly, but inside, quiet, trembling guilt. Like wind in the chimney, soft but endless. I remember the first time I tried to pray after a session. I knelt. I folded my hands. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. No words. No thoughts. Just an aching sort of blankness like the inside of an extinguished candle. And yet the work continued. It always does. I polished the boot. I sharpened the blades, not because I want them sharp, but because dull blades are crueler. I oil the leather straps so they don't chafe too much. Sometimes that's the most kindness I can offer. There's no glamour here, no villain's monologue, no twisted grin. Just wait. And where, and duty, I sweep the floor often. Dust settles quick in old buildings, and I cannot stand to see it gather. I empty the ash from the fire grate, though we rarely use it. In summer, the chamber grows thick with heat. In winter, your breath curls in the air like smoke. Even the rats are quiet here. Once, I found a candle melted into the corner. No one had lit it. It had fallen, burned unnoticed. I stared at the misshapen wax for a long time. It looked like a hand, outstretched. I didn't move it for days. This room has known more silence than speech, more stillness than motion. But in that stillness, something grows. A kind of gravity, a pull that draws the memory back over and over. You walk away, and yet you carry it. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the groan of the wood, the soft drip of water through the ceiling cracks. I tell myself it's nothing, just the building settling. Just wind, just the hour playing tricks, but part of me knows better. Part of me remembers, and yet I return each day. I light the torches, I sweep the stones, I oil the press, and I wait. If you're still listening, perhaps you felt heavy jobs in your own life too, ones you never asked for, ones you did anyway. Let me know. Sometimes even a whisper is enough. They never asked if it was true, only if it looked true enough for the crowd. That's what justice was, more often than not. A kind of theater, carefully arranged, solemn-faced, clothed in authority, but theater all the same. I came to understand that slowly, like fog lifting off a field. I'd thought, when I first began, that the chamber was where it all happened, that the truth was wrung out between stone and iron in secret, behind closed doors. But the real show, that took place outside. There were feast days when the square would fill with faces, and not for dancing or prayer. No, those days were for judgment, for verdicts, for sentences carried out beneath the open sky. People brought bread. Children sat on shoulders. Old women knitted while men whispered. You'd think it was a market day, the way they gathered. I was expected to stand near the platform, not always at the center, but close enough to be seen, cloaked in dark wool. Who'd down? The tools weren't with me, not those, but they didn't need to be. My presence was the tool, a reminder, a warning. That was the role. There's a kind of hush that falls before a sentence is read, a suspension of breath, as though everyone leans in, not to hear the judgment, but to be part of it. And when the words come, guilty of theft, guilty of heresy, Guilty of defiance, the crowd exhales like a creature satisfied. Sometimes there was punishment there, in the square. A whipping post, a pillory. Branding iron, heated red, and solemnly pressed to skin, not often death. Death was rarer than the stories tell. Pain was more useful. Pain could be remembered. And memory was the most effective law of all. I recall one man middle-aged, pale as milk, caught stealing grain during a drought. He confessed, of course. They all confessed, eventually, but it wasn't the chamber that haunted me. It was the walk to the square. The way his eyes scanned the crowd, searching for someone who might look at him with mercy. He didn't find anyone. They watched as I stood beside him. They watched as the magistrate lifted the branding iron, and when the hiss came, and he cried out, a few winced, but no one turned away. They needed to see it, that was the point. And when it was done, they went back to their bread. Not all punishments happened like that, of course. Some were quieter. Whispers in the church, exile orders signed with a flourish, disappearances no one spoke of. But those weren't for spectacle. Those were for people with wealth or power. For the rest, the theater was where their fate played out. There was something almost sacred in the arrangement. The magistrate in his chair, the scribes with their quills, the priest hovering nearby, and me shadowed, waiting. My presence signaled that we were past the point of questions, past the point of mercy. We were now in the final act. Sometimes I'd catch the eye of someone in the crowd, a young woman, a farm boy, someone with flour on their hands or hay in their hair, and for just a heartbeat they'd look at me not with fear, but with something else, dread, maybe. Not for me, but for what I represented. Because I wasn't the danger, I was the reminder that the danger was real. Even children learned the rhythm. They knew when to laugh, when to keep silent. I heard them imitating me once, two boys, one pretending to be the magistrate, the other cowering before him, while a third stood to the side, cloaked in an old sack. He mimicked my stillness so well I almost mistook him for myself. They giggled until their mother caught them. Then she hushed them, quickly, glancing toward my window. That's how it worked. Not with laws carved in stone, not with pages written in Latin no one read, but with fear, passed down like a recipe. Baked into the bread, folded into lullabies. I remember one case years ago. A girl no older than 16, accused of consorting with spirits. Nonsense, likely. Her neighbor didn't like her, and someone had seen her gathering herbs under moonlight. That was enough. The magistrate wanted a confession. Something that sounded convincing. I was told to assist, but the girl, she only cried. She spoke of dreams, of headaches, of strange feelings in her chest. She had no demons, only confusion. And yet, by the time she stood in the square, head bowed, wrists bound, the crowd had already decided. The theater had been rehearsed. They knew the lines. I did not look at her. I couldn't. There's an odd comfort in thinking that justice is a clean thing, a sharp knife. A bright torch, but it isn't. It's smoke and mirrors. It's silence and shadow. It's made not in law books, but in stories. The ones people tell each other when they need to believe the world is safe. That wrongs are punished, that sins are answered. So we build our stages, we dress our actors, and we play our parts. It's easier than asking questions. You know, some say the worst thing I've done is the pain I've inflicted. And maybe they're right. But I wonder if the greater cruelty is in standing silent while justice becomes performance. While a crowd cheers a sentence not because it is right, but because it is satisfying, because it ends the play. Once, a man I knew, just a fisherman, quiet, never caused trouble, was dragged before the magistrate over a border dispute. He stood beside me in the square, confused, half-shaven, still smelling of salt water and rope. They accused him of trespass, of theft. He didn't even know what land they meant. But the landowner was powerful, the crowd restless, and the fisherman. Well, he looked guilty enough. Worn face, stained hands. A little too quiet, so they punished him. Later they laughed at how he cried. The fisherman left the village a week after. No one saw him again, and no one spoke of it. Are these stories too forgotten today? Share your thoughts with me, because remembering is the only way to keep the theater from becoming law. And justice? Justice deserves more than a stage. Their faces never left me, not really, not after the door closed. I used to think that when a task was done truly done, it would vanish, fade into the mist of forgetfulness, like footprints in snow, but some things stay, not because you want them to, not even because they were terrible. They stay because you look someone in the eyes while they were breaking, and that never unroots itself. I can still see them, not always clearly, not always in detail, but in pieces. A scar above a brow, a trembling lip, eyes squeezed shut against a question I didn't want to ask, but had to. I didn't keep a ledger of names. That would have made it worse, I think. Or maybe it would have helped. No one ever taught me how to carry this. I remember a boy once, barely more than a child, caught poaching, they said. Or maybe he'd stolen bread. I can't recall what the charge was, only that his hands were soft, unused to labor, still fat with youth. He looked at me like I was the one on trial. He said he didn't do it, kept saying it, through tears, through the quiet. His voice was like a reed thin, but stubborn, and I believed him. I truly did, but belief didn't matter. The magistrate had signed the order. The village needed someone to blame for their hunger. For their fear, they needed a confession, and so I took one. I don't know what happened to him afterward. Most I never saw again. Some were fined, some sent away, a few ended beneath the square. But that boy, sometimes I imagined he lived, that he found a village where no one knew his name, that he forgot my face, that he stopped flinching when a door creaked. I hope he forgot, because I never did. Some faces haunt you not because they cried, but because they didn't. There was a woman once middle-aged, strong-jawed, accused of cursing the harvest. She didn't scream. She didn't plead. She simply stared, not at the walls, not at the tools, at me. That was worse. There was no pain that could match the weight of that gaze. It was like being seen from the inside out. I remember wishing she would yell or beg or spit anything but look at me like that. She confessed eventually. They always did. Whether from truth or exhaustion, I couldn't say. But after, when she stood in the square, she didn't hang her head like the others. She stood tall, silent, proud. The village whispered that she was still a witch, that no confession could undo that kind of defiance. I never saw her again either. But I still see her in dreams. They come at night, these people I've left behind. Not every night, not always clearly, but often enough. A blurred face in the garden, a shadow near the hearth. Sometimes I wake with the shape of a name in my mouth, but it's gone by morning. You might ask why I didn't stop, why I didn't say no. I ask myself the same. The answer isn't noble. It isn't satisfying. It's the truth of small places, old villages, where roles are tight and eyes are sharper than knives. If I had refused, someone else would have taken the mantle, someone colder, someone cruel. I've seen what happens when men enjoy the task too much. I didn't want to be that. But I also didn't want to be the reason someone I loved went hungry. Or worse, so I told myself it was duty. That word, duty, is heavy. It can be used to justify so much. I clung to it like driftwood in a storm. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, it slipped from my fingers. There were days I couldn't eat. Not from guilt. Guilt is sharp, yes, but it dulls. This was something else, a hollowing. As though part of me was being carved out each time someone looked at me in that room with fear. I used to hum to myself during the worst of it. A tune my mother once sang, soft and simple. I never thought much of it until I caught someone else, one of the accused, murmuring the same melody. They must have heard me. They must have remembered. After that, I stopped singing. I stopped a lot of things. There were moments, brief but real, when I wanted to undo it all. To go to the magistrate and say, no more, let someone else. Let it end, but I'd see my father's old tools hanging on the wall. I'd remember his hands. The way he looked at the floor more than he looked at people. He never said it outright, but I think the weight was with him too. He trained me not because he wanted to, but because no one else would, and so the cycle spun on. People imagine the chamber is full of screams. They think the walls echo with agony. But it's the silence that stays with me. The long, unbearable silence before the first question, before the second. When you and another soul are caught between decision and consequence and you both know the cost. Some begged me to believe them. Some cursed me with words I still don't fully understand. Some just wept, quietly, as if they knew I couldn't change the outcome. As if they'd accepted it long before the door closed behind them. And I told myself I was only a part of the machine. That I wasn't the one who judged. I was only the one who asked. But the truth is, my hands held the weight of that judgment. Even if the law wore another man's face. Sometimes I'd pass places in the village and pause, without knowing why. A tree stump. A cobbled path. A corner near the market. And then it comes back, oh. That's where she dropped her shawl. That's where he looked up at the sky and whispered something before they took him. Memories tied to places like ghosts pinned to soil. I've tried to make peace with it all. Not to excuse myself, not to forget, but to understand. Because if I can't understand it, then what was it all for? What does it mean to be the instrument of pain in a world that demands obedience more than truth? What does it mean to survive? When survival comes at the cost of your own reflection? Sometimes, in the stillness of late evening, I light a candle and watch the flame flicker. And I speak aloud, not prayers, not confessions, just names. Names I remember, or pieces of them. It's not enough, but it's something. Maybe you've carried something too. A thing you did because you had no choice, or because you thought you were doing the right thing. Maybe it still echoes in you, like a bell rung long ago. If it does, you're not alone. You're truly not, because long after the chamber emptied, long after the questions stopped, they still return to me. Their faces, their voices, and I carry them, not as punishment, but as memory, because someone should. Do you ever carry the weight of things done out of duty? You're not alone. The mornings are slow now. I rise not to the sound of knocking fists or jangling keys, but to the soft creak of the hearth cooling in the early light. My knees ache before I even sit up. My hands tremble a little more each day. I no longer bother smoothing the linen of my shift or braiding my hair just so. There's no one left to care how I look. No one left to impress or to intimidate. And perhaps for the first time in my life, I'm truly alone. It's a gentler sort of loneliness than I'd expected. I tend to my little stove. I stir barley into hot broth. I sit outside when the weather allows, letting the sun rest on my shoulders as if it might bless me after all these years. I speak aloud to the birds, to the passing clouds, to the wind that sometimes sounds like footsteps, but no one ever comes. Sometimes children pass by my cottage, whispering, not out of fear, I think, but curiosity. They don't really know who I am. Perhaps they've heard stories from their grandparents' vague things, grim fairy tales, warnings not to misbehave. She lives out there, they say, in the woods where the stone room is. They don't call me by name. I doubt they know it. And maybe that's best. Names are strange things, heavy, sometimes. My name was once spoken in courtrooms, muttered in prayers, spat in hatred, whispered in fear. And now, it rests quiet in my own mouth, used only to talk to myself. It doesn't hurt anymore, it's just hollow. The tools are still here. I didn't burn them. I couldn't, not out of sentiment, but out of some deep sense that to destroy them would be a kind of lie. They were real, they existed, they were used. And I was the one who used them. I've wrapped them in oilcloth and tucked them beneath the floorboards. Not to hide them, but to protect others from them, and maybe to protect them from others too. I worry what someone might do if they found them and didn't understand. They're quiet now, as I am. Some days I wonder if they'll outlast me. If years from now, a root will push through the floor, shift the earth, and expose them to the light again. And if they do, I hope the person who finds them doesn't just ask what they were for. I hope they ask why. I hope they wonder who had to hold them. And whether I cried the first time, and whether I cried the last, I dream less than I used to. The faces come now only on still nights, when the wind is high and the fire burns low. They visit not in terror, but in quiet procession, like memories at a funeral. They do not speak, they do not accuse. They simply look at me, and I look back. I still don't know all their names. I wish I did. I try not to romanticize. I know what I did. I know it wasn't just duty. There were moments I was cruel. Moments I convinced myself I had no choice, when in truth I did, and I made the worst one. I know where I stood, I know what the room smelled like. I know how long a person can scream before their voice collapses, but I also know this: I never wanted to hurt anyone. I only wanted to survive. I wanted to keep my home, to avoid the stocks, the pyre, the rope. I wanted to keep my father's roof, to eat, to sleep, to walk through the village without my wrists in irons. I did what was expected. I followed the rules of the time. And when those rules changed, I faded with them. Maybe that's cowardice. Or maybe it's what all of us do, in our own ways. A neighbor brought me a loaf of bread once, not long ago. She didn't speak much, just left it on the step and nodded. Her child had been ill, and I'd left herbs at her gate. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't forgiveness. It was something quieter than both acknowledgement, and that meant more to me than any pardon ever could. The world is softer now. There are still injustices, of course. Still punishments, still prisons, still men and women locked away by laws that twist like vines, but the fire is gone from it. The theater, the fear. At least here, in this quiet village. Perhaps that is what peace looks like, not the absence of wrong, but the absence of spectacle, and what of me. I knit sometimes, I hum. I care for a few chickens, though they give me more sass than eggs. I read little I can, I rest. I sit in the warmth and try not to grip the arm of the chair too tightly when the wind blows just so. I've thought of writing down my story, but I fear no one would read it. Or worse, someone would and not understand. That's why I speak it now, here, to you. Not to ask for redemption, not to explain it all away, but to let it live so I'm not buried in silence. Because silence was always my curse. Not the screaming, but the quiet that came after, the part no one heard, the part that stays. And if you've listened this far, I thank you. Not everyone wants to sit beside the fire and hear from someone like me. Not everyone wants to know that even those we fear most are people too. I've come to believe that history is not made by kings or courts, but by the silent choices of people like me, people whose names are lost, but whose hands shaped the world behind the curtain. And if that's true, if I have shaped even the smallest corner of the past, then let it be known that I end my days not as the torturer, but as a woman sitting alone, with worn hands and a quiet voice, still trying to understand what she was made into. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I only wanted to survive. If this story meant something to you, if it made you think or feel, or simply kept you company for a little while, you're welcome to stay. You can subscribe for more quiet journeys through forgotten corners of history. And above all, sleep well tonight.